I kicked his door open, so hard it hit the wall. "Get up." Leo didn't move. He was flat on his back, fully dressed, shoes still on, one arm thrown over his face like the light was hurting him. His jacket was stained, dark, greasy smears along both sleeves. The room smelled like diesel and sweat and something metallic I couldn't name. It was 2:15 in the afternoon. "Leo." I stepped inside. I said, "Get up." He moved his arm, looked at me with eyes that were barely open. Not surprised, not guilty, just empty. Like a man who had already used everything he had and had nothing left to perform with. "I heard you," he said. "Mom called me." My voice was shaking, but not from sadness. "She said you dropped out. She said you went to the registrar's office and you dropped out. 3 months before you finish." 3 months, and Leo. He said nothing. "Do you understand what I gave up for you?" The words were coming fast now. "Do you know how many shifts I worked? How many times I told myself, just get him through school, just get him across the finish line, and it will be worth it?" Leo looked at the ceiling. "Look at me." My voice cracked on the last word. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." He turned his head slowly. His eyes met mine, and I saw nothing in them that looked like an excuse. Nothing that looked like a fight. Just that same terrible, bottomless tired. That was what broke me. I called him pathetic. I said it clearly, like I wanted the word to land. I told him he was a leech, that while I was out there building something with my life, he was in here rotting. I said everything I'd been swallowing for years, every resentment, on every sacrifice I had made quietly. I said all of it, standing in his doorway, while our mother went silent in the kitchen down the hall. Leo let me finish. Then he pulled the blanket up over his hands, rolled to face the wall, and said quietly, "Close the door on your way out." I slammed it instead. I stood in the hallway for a moment, breathing hard. Mom appeared at the end of the corridor, a dish towel in her hands, watching me with an expression I didn't understand at the time. Not fear, not agreement. Something more complicated than both. "Leave him," she said softly. "Leave him?" I almost laughed. "I've been leaving him alone his whole life, and look where it got us." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back to the kitchen without saying another word. I grabbed my keys and left the house. I drove around for almost an hour, too angry to go home, too tired to go back to the office. I kept replaying it, his face, that unbothered expression, the way he couldn't even give me the dignity of an argument. I decided right there in that car. I was done carrying him. He wanted to throw his life away. Fine. That was his choice. I had done my part. What I didn't know, what I had no way of knowing, was that Leo had been awake for 19 hours when I walked into that room. He had just come off a 12-hour night shift at the shipping dock on the edge of the city. The kind of job where you don't sit down, where the foreman doesn't care that your back is screaming or that your hands are so raw from rope and metal that you stop being able to feel your fingertips around the 3rd hour. And he had taken the bus home because he couldn't afford a cab. He had eaten half a sandwich standing over the kitchen sink so he wouldn't wake Mom. And then he had gone to his room, laid down in his clothes, and closed his eyes. That was when I kicked his door open. The grease on his jacket, the stains I had looked at with disgust. That was honest work. That was 12 hours of it. And the reason he had dropped out, the real reason, the one he never told me, was a letter he had found 5 weeks earlier, folded behind the gas bill on the kitchen counter. A letter from the bank, clean official language, the kind that doesn't shout. We had 90 days before they took the house. Leo had done the math in his head, standing in the kitchen alone, while Mom was asleep and I was at work. He figured out what the arrears cost. He figured out what the doc paid. He knew that his part-time job wouldn't cover it. He knew his savings wouldn't touch it. And he knew that if he told me, I would panic, or I would fight him, or I would try to find another way. And there wasn't another way. Not a fast enough one. So he made the decision quietly. Left school. Signed the contract. Started that night. He had been doing it for 5 weeks when I stood over him calling him a leech. He didn't defend himself because the moment he explained it, I would have tried to stop him. And he couldn't let me stop him. Not yet. Not when he was still 50 payments away from the finish line. So he took every word I said. And then he pulled the blanket over his bruised hands, the ones I never thought to look at, and waited for me to leave so he could sleep before his next shift started at 6. I drove home that night feeling like the responsible one, feeling like the brother who had his life together. I had no idea I had just screamed at the person who was quietly saving all of us. I heard him before I saw him. That slow, dragging footstep. The way the back door handle rattled twice before it opened, like his hand couldn't grip it properly. I was standing at the kitchen counter with a glass of water when Leo came through the door at midnight, and my first thought was not concern. My first thought was, here we go again. He was bent slightly to the left, one hand pressed against his ribs. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and there was a dark stain spreading from just below his jacket, wet, slow, and red. He moved like every step was a decision he had to make twice. I watched him make it to the sink, watched him turn the tap on with his elbow because his fingers weren't cooperating, watched the water run pink as it hit his hand. "Who did you piss off this time?" I said. He didn't answer, and he just pressed a kitchen towel against his side and kept his eyes on the sink. "Leo," I set my glass down hard. "I'm talking to you. Look at this house. Look at yourself. You're bleeding on Mom's floor at midnight, and you can't even tell me why." He turned the tap off, stood there for a moment with his head down, breathing slowly through his nose like he was counting something. Then he straightened up, barely, and looked at me. "It's fine," he said. "Go to bed." "It's fine." I almost laughed. "You're a disgrace, Leo. I'm out there every day building something real, and you're in here bleeding in the kitchen like a common thug. What is Mom supposed to think when she sees this in the morning?" He looked at me for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not anger, not hurt. Just something tired and very old. Then he turned back to the sink, ran the tap again, and said nothing. I went to bed. I told myself I was done engaging. I told myself whatever trouble he had gotten into, it was his problem. He was an adult. I couldn't keep cleaning up after him. What I didn't know was that the trouble had happened at the dock. A cable had snapped during a night unload. The recoil caught Leo across the ribs and knocked him into a metal railing. The supervisor offered to call an ambulance. Leo said no, because missing a shift meant missing pay, and missing pay meant the mortgage payment was short. He worked the last 4 hours of his shift with 2 cracked ribs and a gash in his side, held together with a strip of electrical tape from the site's first aid box. He bled through the tape on the bus ride home. 3 days later, I came home to find the front door open, not unlocked. Open, like someone had pushed through it hard and it hadn't fully closed behind them. I walked in and stopped. There were 2 men in the hallway, big men, suits that didn't fit right, the kind of energy that fills a room before anything is even said. One of them was holding a folded document. The other one had Leo's collar in his fist. Leo's back was against the wall. His jaw was already swelling on one side. Dark and sharp, the kind of bruise that comes fast. But he wasn't making a sound. He had both arms out slightly, hands open, like he was trying to keep himself between these men and the hallway behind him. Mom's hallway, where her bedroom door was still closed. He was protecting her from the noise. I didn't understand that then. I saw 2 men I didn't recognize in my house, my brother against the wall, and I stepped forward and told them to get out. They left. Not quickly, but they left, dropping the document on the floor as they went. I picked it up, looked at it. Final notice. I didn't read past those 2 words. I folded it and put it in my pocket without thinking, because the anger was already building, and I turned to Leo and I let it out. 8 hours, I said. I was gone 8 hours. You can't keep this house clean for 8 hours without turning it into a target? His jaw was swollen. There was a fresh cut above his eyebrow from where his head had hit the wall. He looked at me and said nothing. If you want to live like a criminal, go do it somewhere else. Not here. Not where Mom sleeps. He walked past me to the kitchen, so I got ice from the freezer, pressed it against his face, and stood there at the counter alone while I went to my room and closed the door. The document in my pocket, the final notice from the bank, stayed there, unread, until I washed that jacket 2 weeks later and found it, soft and ruined from the machine. By then, everything had already fallen apart. I found the money on a Wednesday. I wasn't looking for it. I went into Leo's room to grab a charger I thought he had borrowed, and there it was, stuffed behind his wardrobe in a folded paper bag. Crumpled 5s, worn 10s, a few 20s rolled tight with a rubber band, the kind of money that looks like it was saved in the dark, 1 note at a time. My stomach dropped. I thought about Mom's purse. I thought about the cash I sometimes left on the kitchen counter. I thought about everything I had been too distracted to notice going missing. And something ugly rose up in my chest, the kind of feeling that makes you move before you think. I had him by the collar before he could get through the doorway. Where did this come from? I had the bag in my other hand. Where is the rest of it? Did you steal from her? Did you steal from Mom? I slammed him against the wall. Look at me. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Where did you get this? Leo looked at me. His eyes were completely calm. The kind of calm that isn't peace. It's just a person who has decided not to fight back. He looked at the bag in my hand. He looked at my face, and I could see something happening behind his eyes, like he was running a calculation, like he was deciding something. He made his choice. No, I saved it, he said quietly. Put it back. Saved it from what? You don't have a job. You dropped out. You don't. Put it back, Alex. His voice didn't rise. Please. I threw the bag at his chest and walked out. That money was 6 months of mortgage payments. He had been pulling it together from the dock job, a few bills at a time, hiding it because he didn't have a bank account that the debt wouldn't reach. He couldn't explain that without explaining everything. And explaining everything meant I would stop him. So he let me think he was a thief. He picked the bag up off the floor, put it back behind the wardrobe, and went back to counting. The storm came on a Friday night. I was asleep. I didn't hear Leo get up at 2 in the morning, but I didn't hear him go out to the back of the house where the roof gutter had been pulling away from the wall for 3 weeks. The one I had said I would fix and hadn't. The one that, in a heavy storm, would send water straight down the back wall and into Mom's room. I didn't hear any of it. What I heard was my alarm at 6:15. I got up, made coffee, grabbed my bag. I opened the back door to check if my car window had been left down in the rain. Leo was on the ground. He was face down in the mud at the base of the wall, soaked through, one arm stretched out toward the drain pipe above him. The ladder was knocked over 2 feet away. His body wasn't moving except for the shallow rise and fall of his breathing, fast and uneven, the kind that comes with a fever. I stood there, and God help me, my first thought, before panic, before anything human, was that he had come in drunk and fallen, that this was just Leo being Leo. Another mess, another morning ruined. I said his name. He didn't respond. I said it louder. Nothing. I told him to get up. I told him he was embarrassing me. I looked at my watch, looked at him, and I picked up my bag and I left for work. I stepped around his outstretched hand on my way to the car, Mom found him 40 minutes later. She called an ambulance. She sat with him in the mud in her house slippers until it came. The doctor said it was exhaustion, a fever from an untreated wound in his side, and 2 cracked ribs that had never been properly rested. He had been running on nothing for months, and I had just stepped over him to get to work on time. I told him to get up. I told him he was embarrassing me. I didn't know I was talking to a man who had already given everything he had left to keep me warm. He said it on a Sunday morning, like it was nothing. We were at the kitchen table. Mom was still asleep. Alex had his coffee and his phone, and that look he gets when he has already made a decision and is only telling you as a courtesy. I found a place, he said. 2 bedrooms, better neighborhood, closer to my office. I'm moving us out next month. I looked up from my cup. It's a rental, he continued. Fresh start. No more of this. He waved his hand around, at the walls, at the ceiling, at everything our father had left behind. You can come if you're contributing. If not, he shrugged. You figure something out. I was $500 away from the final mortgage payment. $500. After 3 years. After every night shift, every cracked rib, every meal I skipped, every birthday I missed. At every time I let him call me useless and said nothing back. I was 1 payment away from owning this house. The house our father died in. The house Mom had lived in for 20 years. And Alex was sitting across from me talking about rentals. I put my cup down and went to my room. I opened the drawer beside my bed. Inside, wrapped in an old cloth, was my father's watch. The one he wore every day until the day he couldn't. The one he had pressed into my hand the last time I visited him in the hospital. Not Alex's. Mine. I had never sold it. Not when the dock work was slow. Not when I was eating 1 meal a day to keep the numbers right. I had carried it through everything. I sold it that afternoon for $600. I made the final payment by 4 o'clock. I should have told him that evening. I know that now. Well, but I came home to Alex in the hallway with a cardboard box, already packing. He had started with the storage cupboard at the top of the stairs, the one where Mom kept old documents, tax papers, things that hadn't been touched in years. He had a folder open in his hand. He was staring at a piece of paper. He didn't hear me come in. I watched him read it twice. I watched his face go through 3 different expressions. Confusion, then something sharp, then something I had never seen on Alex before. A kind of stillness that didn't belong to him. He looked up and found me standing there. "What is this?" His voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. I knew what it was before he held it up. I had known about it for a long time, longer than he had. Mom had told me years ago, on one night when she was sick and frightened and needed to say it out loud to someone. She had made me promise not to tell him until she was ready. She was never ready. It was my birth certificate. His name wasn't on it. The section where a father's name should have been filled in. Blank. And at the bottom, a line he had never seen before. A different surname. Not ours. "You're not..." He stopped. Started again. "You're not actually my brother." He said it like a verdict. Then he threw the paper at me. It hit my chest and fell to the floor. "How long have you known?" he said. "How long have you been in this house pretending? Eating our food, taking our money, letting me..." His voice broke for just a second. He pushed through it. "You've been lying to this family your entire life." I looked at the paper on the floor. I thought about picking it up. I didn't. "I never lied to you," I said. "Get out." He pointed at the door. "Get out of this house. This is not your house. It was never your house." And that was the moment. I could have walked out. Part of me wanted to. After everything. After 3 years of silence, of taking every insult, of bleeding on that kitchen floor and saying nothing. I could have just left and let him figure it out on his own. But I thought about Mom, and I thought about our father, the man who had raised me, whose watch I had just sold that afternoon, whose name I had carried even when it technically wasn't mine. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a folded document and held it out to him. "Read it," I said. He didn't take it at first. He looked at it like it was another thing to be angry about. Then something in my face must have stopped him, because he reached out slowly and unfolded it. I watched him read. It was the release of mortgage, the full document. The house, this house, his house, Mom's house, paid in full. Stamped, dated, signed. No more bank, no more notices, no more 90-day countdowns. He read it once, then again. His eyes moved to the date at the top of the document, then to the payment history attached at the back. 3 years of monthly entries, each one in my name. He flipped back to the first page, looked at the date the payment started. I watched the moment it happened, the moment he connected it. The payment started the same week I left college. He looked up at me, his mouth opened slightly. Nothing came out. "The bank was going to take it," I said. "You didn't know. I didn't want you to know. If you knew, you would have tried to do it your way, and your way would have taken too long." He looked back down at the paper. "The money behind the wardrobe," he said slowly. It wasn't a question. He was just saying it out loud, putting things in order. Mortgage payments, cash. I couldn't use a bank account. The debt collectors had flags on anything in the family name. He was quiet for a long time. "The men at the door," he said. "Bank enforcers. I was 2 weeks late on one payment. They came to assess the property." Another silence. "Your ribs." "Dock accident. Cable snapped." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked like a man who had just realized he had been standing in a room the wrong way around for 3 years. Like the furniture was the same, but everything was facing somewhere different. And he didn't know how he hadn't seen it before. He looked at the birth certificate still on the floor, then back at me. "Leo, you don't have to say anything," I said. "I stepped over you." His voice dropped. "That morning, in the rain, I stepped over your hand and went to work. I know. I called you a thief. I know. I told you this wasn't your house." He stopped. He looked down at the mortgage document in his hands, the one that said, in clean black print, that the house belonged to no bank, no creditor, no deadline anymore. That it was free and clear. Because of me. And I watched something break in him. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. The way a wall doesn't fall all at once but starts to come apart at the joints, slowly, until it can't hold its own weight anymore. He sat down on the floor, right there in the hallway, still holding the paper. I found him 2 hours later at the cemetery, standing at our father's grave. He didn't hear me walk up. He was just standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking at the headstone like he was having a conversation he didn't have the words for yet. I stood next to him. We didn't speak for a long time. The wind moved through the grass. Somewhere behind us, a bird was making noise in a tree. The sun was starting to go down, and the light was turning gold and soft. The first warm light this whole story had seen. Then Alex said, very quietly, "Thank you. Not for the house, not for the money. I think it was for all of it. For staying, for the silence, for not leaving when I had every reason to." I nodded. He wasn't my brother by blood. The paper on the floor said so. But he was standing next to me at our father's grave, and he was crying without making a sound. And I put my hand on his shoulder and left it there. Blood didn't make us brothers. 3 years of choosing each other, even when only one of us knew he was doing it. That was what made us brothers. That was enough. Some people stay quiet not because they have nothing to say, but because they love you too much to let the truth cost you your peace. Leo never needed Alex to understand. He just needed him to be okay. That's what real family does.